I am recording this call now, so what we hope to do is make these presentations available online through our website. So at this time, I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? You probably can. So I will start the slideshow. So this morning, we're going to just start with welcome and introductions. We have our guest presentations by Paul Miller from NOAA and Michael Kotutwa Johnson, a graduate student here at the University of Arizona. And then after each presentation, we can follow up with any questions anyone might have. And we'll just conclude with updates and announcements that anyone would like to share. So let's see. We have on the call. We have Teresa Newberry. If you'd like to just introduce yourself, Dr. Newberry, if you can. She might have stepped away. All right, we have Teresa Newberry on the call. We have Levi Anderson.
Hello, I'm Levi Anderson. I'm with the 29 Palms Band of Mission Indians in Southern California.
Great, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We have Bill Campbell, if you want to introduce yourself. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Let's see. I'm sorry, it's not coming through. Okay, yeah, that's better.
I'm with the Intertribal Council of Nevada. I am the tribal environmental liaison, so I work with all the tribes in Nevada with regard to environmental programs, and I liaise between governmental organizations and the tribes.
Great, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having it.
All right, we have, let's see here. We have Rob Jacob, but I don't think he has audio available, as well as, let's see. Someone from a 760-775-5566, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, this is April Taylor.
Hi.
That's not me, though. I just don't know.
All right, April, and you're with the South Central Climate Science Center?
Yes.
Great, thanks for joining. And then we have a few others joining, so we can just we can just begin with the presentation. And if you want, feel free to type into the chat function if you want me to introduce you. But at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter, Paul Miller, and I'm going to bring up your PowerPoint now. And Paul, I think I just unmuted you.
Yep, I just saw the banner come across. Thanks, Skyler.
Sure. All right. And I'm sharing my screen. And is that your presentation up there?
Yes, it is.
All right, let me just make it full screen. And feel free to start and just tell me when you want to advance to the next slide.
Great, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Skylar, and thanks everybody for inviting us to talk on this call. I think reaching out with tribes is something we've really struggled with in the past, so anything we can do to try and make progress on that, we're all about it. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Paul Miller. I actually graduated from the University of Arizona, so this makes things extra fun. And I work for the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center as the service coordination hydrologist. But all that is a fancy way of saying that my job is to figure out how to help you. So it's my job to figure out what data you need, what we can do to help you make decisions with regards to your resources. And if there's anything we can do, it's my job to make that happen. So if you could advance. So just a quick overview of just who we are as the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center, how we kind of fit into things, and just a quick summary of our operations and products and services, and mostly how can we help. We're just going to scratch the surface of the stuff that we do here. So I'll probably repeat it again, but if you don't see something, or if you don't see the answer to a question you might have, definitely let us know. We have lots and lots of information on our website, and then we have lots and lots of information that isn't on our website. So if just in case you don't see something, we might have it. Next slide. So just a little bit about who we are. We're part of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and part of the National Weather Service. We're one of 13 river forecast centers nationwide, but you can see we cover the entire Colorado River Basin, as well as the eastern half of the Great Basin. And we're all about decision support. We really exist to help you with your resource decisions. We're not like a weather forecast office where we're, preemptively issuing warnings or things like that. We help weather forecast offices, but our big thing is to help agencies, help our stakeholders, help the public understand what's going on with their water resources, what they can expect from their water resources, and anything we can do to help provide information that can help you make decisions. So next slide. We work with a broad range of stakeholders, and the reason we do that is because we rely on data and information for our forecast. We don't produce a lot of the data and information ourselves, so we rely very heavily on folks like the Bureau of Reclamation, the USGS, the SNOTEL network that the Natural Resources Conservation Service does. We even get data from some tribes already. So yeah, we're all about getting data and working with stakeholders to figure out what's the best way that we can get information from them and turn that into useful information that they can turn around and use themselves. So just data is really the foundation of what we do here, and we actually quality control that data at least 3 times a day, if not more. So it's very important to us, and data is one of our number one things. Next slide. So forecasting streamflow in the Colorado River Basin is pretty difficult, in part because it's so variable in this area. And so what I put up here is just a graph of the April through July, kind of that runoff period, that peak runoff period of flows in the upper Colorado River Basin into Lake Powell. And you can see, the average is like 7.25 million acre feet, but we never really get 7.25 million acre feet. It's usually, above or below. It's all over the map. And some folks might be saying, well, what's the big deal in forecasting streamflow if you get 100% snowpack, shouldn't you get about 100% streamflow? And it's much more complicated than that. We take into account lots of variables, which I'll briefly touch on. But that purple line is the percent average of the snow water equivalent in the upper Colorado River Basin. And you can see we've definitely had some really good snowpack years and some very poor streamflow years coupled together. So it's not necessarily that one-to-one correlation that might be intuitive. So if you go to the next slide, and this one's a little bit animated, but if you kind of click, we start with a bunch of data. We get data, here's a picture of a USGS station and a SNOTEL site. And if you click again, that data we use to inform our hydrologic model, and we're bringing in all kinds of information. We're bringing in radar data. We go through that quality control process that I mentioned to make sure that it's good data, that good data is getting into our model. And if you click again, that in turn, we take all that information about temperature and precipitation and climate and the forecast, and we turn that into a stream flow going through our hydrologic model. And if you click one more time, we actually come up with a range of possible hydrologic features. So we take all this data to come up with an ensemble of features that we look at to make our forecast. Right now, our forecast is based off the 1981 through 2010 period. By the end of the year, we're hoping to extend that through the 2015 period. And that helps our stakeholders a bit in ways I'll talk about more in just a little bit. So if you go to the next slide. There's challenges ahead for folks like me trying to make forecasts. I think the biggest one happens to be climate change. Like I mentioned in the last slide, we rely on the past to help us predict the future. So we rely a lot on what the hydrology has looked like over the 1981 through 2010 period. But with climate change going into the future, the past isn't necessarily the best way to represent that. So we're doing work to try and get away from that, because we know temperatures are rising, we know precip is changing, and what it probably means is decreased water supply and stream flows, particularly in the Southwest and the Colorado River Basin. This graphic's just from the National Climate Assessment, the Southwest section. Next slide. So our stakeholders' needs are changing. So back, before I started working here, a lot of the questions that our office got were a lot of these yes/no questions. People wanted to know, what is that one number that I can use to make my decisions? Will I have flooding, yes or no? How much snow is there? I just want a number. But where we're going is people want to know more about the range of forecasts. They want to know about the uncertainty. They want to know what their probability of reaching certain thresholds are. So we're looking at ways to communicate that information better, to give people more of that probabilistic answer. We can still give you that one number, but if you want to know what your range is, what your risks are, we can provide that information too. Next slide. So if you haven't had a chance to go to our website lately, it's cbrfc.noaa.gov, and I have it on the last slide too, so you don't have to copy it down here. But the first thing that's going to pop up is a map showing the hydrologic conditions at gauges throughout our area of concern. And I took this slide off back when we were having some of those very convective storms kind of roll through Arizona. And you can see those dots in greens. Those are areas where things are happening. We were seeing big changes in the flows there. So it's a nice way to kind of look and see where areas of hydrologic interest might be happening. I just put up a couple sample graphics here on the right. But if you click on these gauges, you're able to see not only the historic information in blue, but you also see the forecasted information that's in the green line with the little dots that follow afterwards. So you can see we were forecasting rain in the San Pedro area in Arizona, And you can see we were forecasting that that flow was going to go from about 4 CFS to about 150 CFS or so for about a day. Just kind of peak there and then kind of fall back into that base flow condition. So that's an example of a flashy site in Arizona. A site that's not so flashy, the San Juan River near Bluff, Utah. Not as flashy, but you know, a significant amount of flow comes through here. It's been dry in the area, but still with these storms, we went from about 500 CFS, and we saw kind of this gradual rise, you know, close to 1,000 CFS, and we are forecasting that to come back to base load conditions as well. But again, this is just sort of our short-term forecast, and that's pretty easily accessible just off of our homepage. Next slide. And like I mentioned before, we support the weather offices. When your television starts giving you that warning beep, or your phone starts beeping with a warning from the National Weather Service, we're not issuing those warnings, but we're giving the information to the people that do. So our office, the River Forecast Center, will say, hey, you know, I think we're going to be reaching a flood stage at, in this example, it's the Agua Fria. You know, you should issue a warning. And so then the weather forecast people will go ahead and we'll work with them on the data, and they'll issue that warning. They'll let you know the durations, what to watch out for, that sort of thing. So typically our office is open from about 6:30 in the morning to about 4 p.m. in the afternoon. But during these kinds of events, we'll go to 24/7 operations. So, you know, if there's something that's of a big concern to one of our stakeholders, we'll work around the clock on it. Next slide. Probably our most popular product is our water supply forecast. The Bureau of Reclamation and other folks are interested in how much water they're going to be seeing from the April through July runoff period. So we do a forecast of that. We start issuing it publicly in January, so we'll start posting information about that in January. Once we start getting some of the snowpack accumulated, it gives us a little bit more skill. But, you know, from our end, precip is very important. So any precipitation gauges or temperature gauges, that's something we're keeping a really close eye on. We also model soil moisture. That's also a very important component to our model. But really, the more information we have, the better. So if you happen to have data available, we'd love to get our hands on it. So yeah, anything that'll help us create better forecasts, we're definitely interested in doing that. So if you go to the next slide. So this is just an example of some of our water supply forecasts, and I'm showing the San Juan near Bluff again, and the Gila River, the headwaters of the Gila River. And like I said before, we're trying to not only answer that question about what is the forecast, but we also want to provide information about the uncertainty, what we think the range of stream flows could be. And you can see our forecast, that the red line on the furthest to the left, that's our official January forecast, but every day we update that forecast. And so you can sort of see, like, as the storms come in, as conditions change, how our forecast changes, how our thinking changes, and we carry that through the end of the runoff period in July. Next slide. Another thing I thought might be interesting for folks on this call is we make peak flow forecasts. We do forecasts of the magnitude of a peak flow that people might see during the runoff season. This is really important for environmental managers that are trying to hit environmental goals, whether it has to do with redistributing sediment or helping endangered fish. Lots of reasons, but these peak flows tend to help folks meet their environmental targets. We don't really forecast the timing of the peak, but what we'll do is, as we think that peak is about to happen, we'll direct you to our homepage where those short-term forecasts we'll show you what we think that timing of the peak event is going to be. Next slide. So those are just like 3 of our most popular products. It's definitely not everything we do, but those are sort of the 3 things people tend to ask for a lot. But we do a lot of coordination efforts, and everybody on this call is welcome to participate. We have an annual stakeholder open house where anybody can come. It's going to be happening this year on October 17th and 18th. But it brings together just a broad range of folks. This is where we'll typically take the opportunity to introduce new products and services, talk about if it's going to help people. A lot of the times at this meeting, people will give us an idea or tell us that they'd really like us to work on, X, Y, Z. And then this year, this is when we say, hey, this is how successful we were. These are the roadblocks we came up against. This is where we're at on a particular product. So yeah, it's really a chance for us to introduce new things, reinforce what we typically do, and it's really important for us to get feedback. We only exist to help our stakeholders. So if we're not doing that, then we're not doing our job. So it's important for us to get that feedback that things are working well. We also do frequent webinars during that water supply period. We're doing a webinar at least once a month, just in general for everybody to summarize our forecast. But we can do custom webinars for your group. There's a few people that they said, hey, we would like a webinar that just talks about issues on the Duchesne River, or just talks about issues in the Great Basin. So if there's a particular area that you're interested in, or if you just want sort of that one-on-one attention, we can totally do that. Just let us know, and we can come up with a webinar and a schedule that works for you. And we also do webinars to coordinate with our weather forecast offices. Next slide. In addition to sort of those outreach efforts that we do internally on our own, we love to participate in other groups. Things like this, we really like to get our name out there, get what we do out there, talk to folks, see what we can do better on our end. We like to participate in big multi-agency efforts. I know we have somebody on the call from one of the climate science centers. NOAA has these research groups, the acronym's RESAs, but CLEMAS at the University of Arizona is one that we've worked with in the past. We also work with the Landscape Conservation Cooperative. And we'd love to help out with anything that you guys might have going on. So feel free to directly contact us by phone or email. We tend to be a pretty accessible group. Next slide. Here's just our new and improved homepage. It's constantly getting better. Totally encourage you to check it out. It's way better than it used to be. If you have gone to our website, a year or two ago, we had lots of bandwidth issues. The site was slow. It was clunky. We've done a lot of work to improve this. We've posted a lot of new information on there. In response to some of our stakeholder needs, we came up with a water supply dashboard that you can access from the site. So yeah, definitely take a look at our website, play around with it. If you want, we can even, with your group or anybody that's on the call, we'll just do a webinar on just going through our website, kind of go through and come up with some hypothetical questions, or if you have some questions, and we'll go through and show you how you can click around on our website and answer those kinds of questions. Next slide. And as great as our website is becoming, we're doing a lot of work with other RFCs in the area, and it's coming soon. It's still a work in progress, but it's going to be really cool. It's going to be called the Western Region Monitoring and Outlook page. So if somebody can come up with a catchier acronym or anything like that, please let us know. We'd love to hear about it. but it's going to be more customizable. There's going to be lots of information that comes not only from the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center, but also from the California and Nevada River Forecast Center, the Northwest River Forecast Center, the West Gulf River Forecast Center. We're working with the Missouri Basin River Forecast Center to get their information in as well. So there's going to be lots and lots of useful stuff. Traditionally, we've sort of based our forecast on that April through July period. This website's going to allow you to pick whatever period you'd like to look at. So that's coming soon. Email me and I'll get you on the email list and we'll send out an announcement when it's live to go. Next slide. So you might have heard a little bit about the National Water Center coming online. It's out in Tuscaloosa, Alabama on the University of Alabama campus. And if you click one more time, there's been a couple of news releases. I think it may have oversold things a little bit. These news releases say that it's an operational model, that river forecast centers are really using it. Right now, for our area, it doesn't have an impact on anything that we do here at the River Forecast Center. We are looking at the output and providing feedback to the National Water Center. Basically, the National Water Model right now is missing a lot of regulatory information, like diversions and dams and stuff. So it tends to give us some unreasonable forecasts in our area. But you know, that criticism aside, it's really cool that NOAA has this. We have this big computer and this big hydrologic model, and we're running it, you know, 3 times a day at different outlook periods. So, you know, while this tool might not be immediately useful right now, we have these resources that we're developing. We're going to be able to make forecasts at points all along the river, not just those with gauges. And so that's coming down the road. I think we're still a good 5-10 years away from it being really, really, really useful. But it's something to keep in the back of your mind, and we can talk about that more too if you'd like. Next slide. So just to sort of finish off here in the next 2 or 3 slides, how can we help? We'd love to know what sites and areas are important to you. If you're looking on our website and you're not seeing a particular gauge site or area that's important to you, let us know. The big limitation is really data, but if you can point us to where to get the data, or if we can talk with the USGS and get a gauge there or something along those lines, as long as we have data, we can develop a forecast there. So yeah, if you let us know what sites you need, what's important to you, we'd love to try and help you as far as that goes. Next slide. So Chad mentioned when he asked me to talk, if I mentioned how folks on the call could help us. And, you know, we always need data. And we get data in a bunch of different ways. People email it to us, people phone it in, people FTP it over to us. But we can work with you to figure out a way that's easy for you to send us data and go from there. Like I said before, we do work with some tribes, and we understand that some tribal information can be proprietary. So we can make it so that, you know, if you send us information and you don't really want it getting out to the more general public, we can set it up so that it's visible only on our end and on your end. So yeah, we can keep data confidential if that's a concern. But yeah, let us know what your major decision points are, what your thresholds and vulnerabilities are, and we'd love to try and help with that. Last slide. So here's all our contact information. Michelle's my boss. She's the hydrologist in charge. John Lotak, he's the guy's a genius. He can make anything work. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities there. But feel free to give us a call or go to our website or email any of us. Yeah, we'd really like to hear from you. We'd like to think we're very accessible. And yeah, thanks again for letting us talk on your webinar.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Paul. I'm going to switch back to, I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see if anyone has any questions. You can, I think everybody's mostly muted, but if you want, you can type them into the chat function. And we have a question right now from Michael Johnson, who's here with us at who's going to present next. So he's going to ask a question here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm presenting next, but I'm also from the Hopi Reservation, and I'm also a former NRCS district conservationist out there. And what I wanted to know is NOAA is like, if we were to overlay your map with the weather stations and even your hydrological map, there doesn't seem to be that much information gathering on reservations that I'm aware of. And I'm just wondering, what would be the reason for that there wouldn't be enough? Because for example, when I was working for NRCS, we had drought programs that the Farm Service Agency was offering, but we didn't have the data and the numbers to take advantage of those programs. And so I'm just kind of wondering why NOAA doesn't seem to have as many weathering stations or those hydrological data capturing devices on reservations with big land bases, specifically those ones up in Utah, Montana, Arizona, and so forth.
That's a really good question. Most of the I don't want to say it's most of the delay and most of the work that comes into putting a station on reservation land. There's a lot more hoops to jump through, I suppose, in getting a station put on reservation land. It's mostly a permitting issue and an accessibility issue. So if any tribe is, if they want to put up a station, or if they want to allow NOAA to put up a station, we'd love to help make that happen. But I think sometimes, from my viewpoint, I think we just sometimes don't have the right contact information on who to talk to put a gauge in a particular location. You try and find out, and you end up not talking to the right people. So yeah, I think if we can just get in contact with the right people, then I think that becomes a lot more possible. But it's just it's mostly a permitting thing. It's a lot easier to put a gauge on, federally owned land than a reservation.
Yeah, but the reservations are federally owned land. That's the whole thing. The reservations are held in trust by the United States, and so they are federally owned land. But I can understand your point of view of seeking permissions from the tribe. And it'd be my hope that the institute here would, at some point, send out a letter to the tribes that would allow them to possibly pass council resolutions, because it has to be done at the government level, because this is a government-to-government relationship. So it would be my hope that this center here that works with tribes here at the U of A would be willing to do that, so that we can participate more fully in these federal programs that the United States offers us. It's just sometimes we're limited by, just like you said, by the data, because once you have the data, then it's a lot more easier to get our point across as far as the Native Nations is concerned.
Totally agree. Yeah, I completely agree. And any help we can be in helping to facilitate and do that, yeah, definitely let us know how we can help.
Okay, thank you for your answers to that. Appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, well, we'll have time at the end for additional questions, but I do want to get started with our next presentation. So let me just bring up your PowerPoint.
I'll give you another one because the other one has like typos in it. That's okay.
Do you have it on you?
Yeah, it's right here.
If you want, you can just plug it in. I can bring it up.
Same one, exactly copied, just the typos in it.
All right, that's fine. Let you bring it up.
It's right here. It's right there. Oops.
That good?
Yep.
All right, I gotta share the screen.
When you share the screen, I won't be around.
It'll just be the screen, yeah.
Okay. So those are my voice.
Yeah. All right.
Hi, like I said, my name's Michael Johnson, and I'm a PhD candidate here at the University of Arizona, but I'm also an avid dry farmer. And so part of my research is just looking at and trying to create the creation of accessibility to mostly just programs that the USDA has to offer. So this is kind of the introduction of my current research. Under my present study, I'm doing a paper on the barriers associated with the Environmental Quality Incentives Program on the Hopi Reservation, which is a program that I used to run up there. And the other one is just paper on equal hydrological principles and processes of Hopi dry farming. And the last thing is the development of a best practices manual of Hopi agricultural conservation practices. And I'll explain a little bit about each. So the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, for those of you who don't know, is the United States Department of Agriculture USDA conservation program administered by the Natural Resource Conservation Service. The primary mission of EQIP is to address farmers and ranchers' natural resource concerns by providing financial and technical assistance. So on EQIP, on Hopi, at the time I was working, we had 59 EQIP contracts that were signed before I had actually got there for 14 projects. But in 2004, after I left there, all but one EQIP contract had been canceled, which resulted in about something like $1.4 million federal dollars for conservation services going right back to the federal government. So what happened? This is what happened. And when I looked at my study, I chose a number of documents to use, and I did what they call a coding analysis. And so one of my biggest primary factors, actually three of them kind of domino effect the rest of them, that was a lack of capital. As most people know, or maybe some people don't know, there's usually a lack of capital, especially when it comes to doing conservation programs, because there's so much need that the tribes have in other entities, such as like education and healthcare, and just running their own tribal government. There was also something that Paul had touched on. It was a lack of communication. There was really no really effective communication between the federal agency and the tribe themselves, and even the contract holders who had their contracts terminated. And also we have something here that doesn't exist in a lot of areas, and that's called land tenure issues, because reservations are made up of different types of classification, which is basically you can have allotted land, ceded land, fee simple land, trust land held in common. So there's a number of varieties of land control and jurisdictions, and therefore you get a lot of issues on who signs what and who does what. And it all ties back up into what I found. And from that, you have all these other barriers that I had found that I'm talking about in this paper that should be published hopefully within the next 6 months. So what do I do now? I always like to say, what do I do now? First, I need to validate our Hopi agricultural conservation practices through initial paper, which I'm working on. And that's called the Equal Hydrological Principles and Process of Hopi Dryland Farming. And I also wanted to develop a model, like my best practices manual, on Hopi agricultural techniques to increase accessibility in USDA NRCS programs like EQIP. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. So here's a paper example. Here's something that I looked at, and because our agricultural system is different, we don't use irrigation or herbicides or pesticides. Our example of a common water budget out here would be the one on the right hand of your screen. There would be the Hopi water budget, where every technique we use when it comes to agriculture is concerned about soil moisture, whether it's spacing, whether it's how many plants, what the depth of the seed placement is. It's all about soil moisture. Whereas a common water budget on the western side would be precipitation being at the middle, and all the little arrows and stuff is pretty much what I've learned here at the school here at U of A. So what I wanted to try to do, and I was talking about trying to lift the aspects of communication and actually participate in this EQIP program, because right now there has been no farming EQIP contracts up on the Hopi Reservation because it's totally different. So what I wanted to show people is develop this model where it demonstrates that what we do from a indigenous traditional ecological point of view as it relates to conservation is just as valid as what NRCS would like us to do. And so I came up with a comparison table that I don't have on this, but this is just something that kind of talks about what I'm trying to do as far as my best practices manual is concerned. I just want us to be able to participate and us not have to go the other way around and do everything what the federal government wants us to do, when our conservation techniques are just as valid, and if not more so, than what the government has to offer us. So what am I going to do after my dissertation? First of all, I'm going to continue development of an economic model with culturally incorporated as price for indigenous communities in the United States. What I'm talking about right now is most USDA models when it comes to agricultural products only looks at the value of price. They don't look at what goes into price like some of our culture. So we're able to participate more fully in these USDA programs. Also, I want to have this continued development of a patenting process for the protection of intellectual property, such as seeds in indigenous communities in the United States, as well as the regions of the globe. And so these are kind of my broad perspectives. And I also want to increase American Indian accessibility to USDA programs like EQIP, and based upon, trying to outreach further with operations like NOAA that can give us the data that we need to participate. And also I wanted to, my long-term goal would be to attempt to help stabilize traditional indigenous agricultural systems around the globe to basically hold on to our biodiversity and everything else. But right now, I think my main focus right now is finishing on trying to complete my dissertation, and hopefully I'll be done this spring. So I was asked to kind of present some of my background research, and so I have presented it here. So I hope that's kind of satisfied to everybody's needs and wants, and I'm able to answer a number of questions also, because I do have a pretty extensive field in dealing with the federal government due to my past experiences and my experiences here at school, doing my research and just my general take on things. And thank you very much. And again, I didn't put my contact information up, but I'm sure that the center here that Chad's working at Native Nations Climate Adaptation Program has more information if anybody wants to get a hold on me, and I'm able to answer any questions that are presented here today. And thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Michael. I'm going to go back to seeing all the different participants. See if anyone has any. It looks like Katie Steele had a comment. Tony Merriman at the National Weather Service in Flagstaff is trying to expand kokoras across tribal lands in Arizona. Voluntary precipitation reporting. This would improve precipitation data across the gaps in stations. He's also a good resource about the Cooperative Observer System, and that's www.cocorahs.org, and we can share that information for those of you who are calling in. Does anyone have, let's see, I have Katie Steele, so I think, and I think that was you raised your hand for that. April Taylor, her comment, also tribes can include such efforts in their EPA grants. So thank you for that comment. All right, let me see here. You, Katie, you are I can unmute you at 575. All right, Katie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Sure.
I just have a quick question for Michael, given the topic you've just spoken on. My colleague, Julian, is arranging a session at the National Adaptation Forum about trying to improve uptake of programs such as ECAP on tribal lands. And it strikes me that you're talking exactly on what they want to learn more about and want to present on. So if you don't mind, I'll share your details with him to see if you might be able to make a contribution to that session. It'll be in St. Paul in May.
Yes, I can do that. Oh yeah, I can do that. Like I said, I'm willing to help. My whole thing about what I do here and what I'm going to be doing is just to increase accessibility to programs like you're talking about. So feel free to share my information with them wherever you please, and I'll be here until I graduate, which will be actually in May sometime afterly. So, but just let me know, and I'll be willing to help and do anything I can to either bring some of the problems that we have. You know, I hear that you had mentioned some of these EPA grants, but a lot of tribes, sometimes their grant writers aren't geared, or they don't have a grant writer. But like I said, their main focus on most reservations that I'm aware of are on social issues, just trying to preserve what they have in the community.
Right. Well, thank you. I'll pass your details on.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I will share, actually, what you can do is you can type into here. I'm going to have Michael type in his contact information into the comments down here. Oops. If I can figure that out. Yeah, we'll just, I'll just send it out after the call because I just lost there's the chat. Does anyone else have any other comments? April, I will just unmute you. And did you have anything to add to your comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So we've worked with several tribes. So I'm sort of a matchmaker. I help with that grant writing sort of thing that he was talking about, that a lot of tribes don't have a grant writer, or it's an additional hat they wear as they're now the grant writer too. But we've worked with several tribes in their EPA GAP grants, their 106 grants, and different ways to include climate monitoring type things. And the NOAA guy mentioned something about soil moisture, and I was wondering if we could send out some information on you know, if there are opportunities to include, so like with the Kokorust, we've had conversations with them about how to include Kokorust in the grants and who our main contacts are. Does NOAA have a point of contact type of thing to work with to include different monitoring or equipment in various grants?
That's a good question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I don't know if I'd say we have one specific point of contact to talk about with grants. One bummer thing about our particular field office, and I think most of the Weather Service field offices in general, is we don't have a mechanism to distribute funds we just don't have a mechanism to distribute funds. So we typically, like UCAR, the University Center for Atmospheric Research, or what's the other one? There's some other grants out there that sometimes require work with a National Weather Service or a NOAA field office.
Right.
And that's where we love to come in. We can write letters of support. We can talk about the importance of monitoring networks or any particular type of research that
Right.
researchers might be interested in doing with us. So yeah, we'd love to help out with that.
So I'm across the street from the Norman office, National Weather Service, NOAA office. And I work with different people there that, and so one of the projects that we have is we're wanting to set up a network of Davis weather stations at high native population schools in Oklahoma. And so it's interesting because we're having to go out and sort of create those relationships and sort of sell it to them to be able to go after the grant to say, this is who's interested, and this is where they would be interested in maybe having their weather station type of thing, and really sort of cashing out all of that sort of for the grant process.
Right, and so I think river forecast centers are really, I don't know if you've talked with anybody, I'm trying to think which river forecast center overlaps that
It's
particular
in Tulsa.
area.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so that's the Missouri Basin river forecast center. Yeah, so yeah, I can get you in touch with some folks over there, and yeah, I tend to think river forecast centers, we tend to be a bit more, we're definitely an operational office, but there's a research component to what we do, and I think we tend to work.
So we've worked with, we've also worked with the USGS Water Science Center here in Oklahoma City to do trainings with tribal staff on how to do these new monitoring type things, and and so we get out in the field with them, and we do a lot of it's water quality type things and new technologies, or maybe remote new equipment, new things, and how to do things. Have you guys done any of those types of trainings or?
Trainings on with monitoring equipment?
Right.
Typically, we don't do that. We work with the weather forecast offices.
Right.
Usually, there's a service hydrologist in those offices that will go out and talk with folks. That being said, if there's not a service hydrologist available, I don't see why an RC couldn't do that. But it's typically not something we do.
We also have done on the GIS side, on the data side, we've partnered to do trainings to help them. And so the others, Paul, I guess, talked about sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second, the need for data on tribal lands, and so working with more of a technical GIS type of staff person with the tribes as well.
I think that's really great. One thing, I didn't present on it, but we could always talk about it in more detail, is we have a very old model that didn't know about remote sensing and GIS and that sort of stuff, but we've come up with some innovative ways to incorporate that information. We've been working with NASA. They've been remotely sensing snowpack information in the area and dust on snow information. And what we can do with that information is do some pre-processing. And what we'll do is we can artificially tweak our model temperatures to slow down a snowpack melt rate or accelerate a snowpack melt rate, and we can get more accurate forecasts that way. So yeah, we can come up with some creative ways to use that data.
Right, and NASA Ames is very interested in doing trainings and working with tribes. They're actually doing a whole training at the Tribal GIS Conference in Albuquerque in November this year.
Very cool.
All right, great. Well, I'm going to just end with a few announcements that we have on our end. So let me just share my screen again. So we wanted to announce that the NNCAP website is now live. We've been working on this for several months. So this is our homepage. So we have a number of options available to look into at on your free time. Resources, some of the projects that we are specifically working on, and then news is our updates, which are available on the homepage. So feel free to peruse this website and to share it with your networks. And two things that I wanted to bring to your attention are two job openings that are available, kind of affiliated with, the first one is directly affiliated with us. It's an assistant research scientist position we're looking to fill. There's information available. So through the website, click on here and it gives you more detailed information about the position and how you can apply. And then in addition to that, this other position, Tribal Climate Science Liaison with the Southwest Climate Science Center. It's also a position with AHEC, American Indian Higher Education Consortium, I believe. So feel free to share those job openings with your networks. And and at this time, if there are any other updates or information people would like to share, please put in a comment, or I think I'll just unmute everyone, so feel free to just chime in. I think everyone's unmuted. And Michael Johnson, he did share his contact information in the comments section, or the chat section. And for those of you who are listening through your phone, his email is kotutwa@email.arizona.edu. And he can be reached at 928-313-3936.
Hey, Chad. This is April.
Hi.
I'm just curious. So you mentioned the position at the Climate Science Center and the new liaisons. I'm part of the team that will be doing the orientation activities and trainings. And I think with Rachel Novak, we're planning an orientation webinar in potentially late November, early December for the first round when that position gets hired and on board. And then there'll be a face-to-face orientation in probably late March here in Norman for those people.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's something that you guys would want your research scientists to be included in that, and at least sort of aware of those activities. I don't know how closely you see those two positions working together. But.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I will have we will follow up with you if you want to send us an email with the information so that we can get the Southwest Climate Science Center, Carrie Enquist here, on board, and so she's aware of that. I think that'd be a great opportunity for collaboration.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who's been sitting on the calls for the Southwest. From the Southwest Climate Science Center.
It might be Christine Shermer.
Yeah, Christine.
Okay, yeah, she's the.
I haven't actually met
coordinator.
Christine. Yeah. But she's been the one sitting on the orientation calls.
All right, great. Yeah, she's just down the hallway from us here, so
Great.
we can make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
I have a job announcement also.
All right.
It's working as the Northwest Climate Center Tribal Liaison.
It's exactly the same positions
Yeah.
that we're talking about.
Yeah. Contact person is Don Sampson in Corvallis, Washington. His email address is don@seventhgenerationllc.com.
All right, great. We will add that to the notes.
The one in Alaska is also open, but I haven't actually seen it, so I can't share that one.
Okay. And we can make these positions available through our website, the Native Nations Climate Adaptation Program website. So if you want, feel free to email Chad feel free to email Chad. He is csm15@email.arizona.edu. Or you can call us. One of our phone numbers is 520-626-1620. But if there's any job positions like that related to tribal climate change positions, we'd be happy to advertise them on our website. All right, with that, if no one has any other questions, we can end the call here. And if there's anything you want to follow up with, please feel free to email us.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Good session. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kyla. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.